You're listening to Beyond the Classroom, going where history happens.
Perfect.
Greetings, gentle listener. This is your co-host, Reggie Martell, and sitting across from me in the captain's chair is Bill Holliday, author of Beyond the Classroom, a book chronicling his adventures during a 1 million-year career as an educator, introducing students at every level to history and the human condition without using a textbook.
You know what the Zapruder film is.
I do know what the Zapruder film is. The Zapruder film is the film of, horrifyingly, of the JFK assassination, right? Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
There were other films that were made that day. People were filming that day other than Abraham Zapruder. But his chronicles the entire sequence of the assassination of President Kennedy. And therefore it is a primary piece of evidence in the John F. Kennedy assassination case.
Yeah, when people talk about the JFK case, the Zapruder film is, and actually the Zapruder film is something that comes up a lot in pop culture. Like, you'll hear people refer to it, the Zapruder film, or, you know, when people refer to the Zapruder film, it's like something that's gone over in microscopic detail. Like they looked at so-and-so's Oscar dress like it was the Zapruder film. It just means they went over, they went crazy looking at it in minute detail, right?
I don't know about going crazy, but Robert Groden has looked over this with a fine-tooth comb, and we have him today as our guest.
We have met Robert Groden. Robert Groden is...
rather than us tell.
Yeah.
Because I asked him, I don't know if you left it in there.
Yeah.
And he talks about being Ferris Bueller
yeah, right.
School and hearing the announcement that Kennedy had been killed. So Kennedy was killed on Robert Groden's 18th birthday, a day on which he was skipping school when he got the announcement. A few years later, he was working. He'll tell you where he was working, so we can put that in there. And had a chance to work with the Zapruder film.
But suffices to say, nobody knows more about the Zapruder film than Robert Groden, and we're about to talk to him.
Well, I think we can get started formally. I'm Bill Holliday, here today with Robert Groden, the world's expert on the film and photographic evidence in the John F. Kennedy murder case, still unsolved after 60 years, and we're here specifically to talk about the film that was taken by an ordinary citizen in the city of Dallas on November 22nd, a man named Abraham Zapruder, who took his camera from his place of work, perched himself in the plaza, and, not knowing what was going to happen, filmed one of the most important, and Robert, you would say the most important piece of evidence in the Kennedy assassination.
Definitely the most important evidence, and also the most important piece of 26-second film in the history of mankind.
Robert, you're the person who gave the American people and the world the Abraham Zapruder film. March 6, 1975, you were 32 years old. You went on television, ABC, Jeraldo Revera. There's a very famous clip of that, and you were the first one to publicly show the Zapruder film. Can you tell our audience why all the fuss, why all the secrecy with the Zapruder film, which was filmed on November 22nd, 1963? Here it is 12 years later, and you're able to finally give the American people a look at that film.
Well, the Zapruder film, as you just mentioned, was taken just by happenstance. It's one of 5 known films taken at the exact moment of the fatal headshot. I have released 4 of them. The 5th one was taken by the FBI and withheld from public view, though they all have been withheld from public view. But the important thing is that it's a actual accurate record of what actually did happen. Of the 5 films, which are Zapruder, Nix, Muchmore, Bronson, and Oliver, those are the 5. Oliver's one that the FBI confiscated and it's never been seen, at least from outside the FBI offices anyway. But the other 4 I released over a short period of time back in the 1970s, actually 1975. And they all show that the president was shot from the front. The official story, of course, is that he was shot from behind from the Texas School Book Depository by Lee Harvey Oswald. But the films all show that the fatal shot came from the front and to the president to the back. Newton's second law of physics is transfer of momentum. That is, as bullets traveling in a specific direction, what it hits is going to travel in the same direction. And the Zapruder film shows that didn't happen. Now, Abraham Zapruder sold the film to Life magazine 2 days after the assassination, and they stuck it in the vault on the 31st floor of the Time Life building, and we're never going to release it. It was being suppressed completely, except for individual frames that Life magazine published in Life magazine, and that's all we ever got to see. Life magazine wanted to see if the film would hold up, going from 8 millimeter to 35 millimeter. And I worked for a company in New York, and that company specialized in a lot of things, including blowing up 8 millimeter film to 35. And we did it, and it held up extremely well. Suffice to say, an extra copy was made that nobody knew about. That was given to me, and when the opportunity became possible to do, I was asked to release it on national television, and I did. And that's what got the case reopened.
Let's follow what happened to the Zapruder film. Zapruder went to a shop, I will say, in Dallas, and his film was developed right there in Dallas on the night of the assassination. Yes? No?
Well, what happened, it was actually done in the afternoon of the assassination, and it was done at Eastman Kodak by Love Field. It's a Kodak laboratory, developing laboratory. And they processed the film, and it was taken to another laboratory called Jameson. Jameson made officially 3 copies, which were given back to Mr. Zapruder. Zapruder gave 2 copies to the Secret Service and kept 1 himself, along with the original. When it was found out by the press that the film existed, Mr. Zapruder started a bidding war, per se, to get the film sold and I guess potentially get it out to the public. The film itself shows the exact moment of the fatal headshot. It starts as soon as the president has completed a turn onto Elm Street and stops just after he goes into the underpass. The entire sequence that shows the assassination is on Elm Street and runs for 26 seconds.
So let me ask you, if we can back up just a little bit. On the day of the assassination, you were at home in Hope Lawn, New Jersey, or somewhere else, and it was your 18th birthday?
Well, back then I lived in New York. I was. It's a little bit semi-embarrassing, but it happened on my 18th birthday, November 22nd, 63. And I was playing hooky from high school. It was my birthday, and I pulled a Ferris Bueller type thing and gave myself the day off. So I heard the very first reports coming in from NBC TV. I was watching NBC, and the very first report said the president had been shot. He wasn't pronounced dead yet, but they said that he had been shot in Dallas along with Governor Connolly of Texas. And I heard the first reports, and the first reports were far more accurate than anything else that was told that day. What came across on NBC was, very simply, shots were fired at the president from a hill, and that police were chasing the assassin across the railroad tracks behind the building. Now, I'm from New York City. New York City, virtually everything in Manhattan is a grid, north, south, and east, west. In my mind, from what I knew, from my experience, that's what should have been, according to what I heard. They said the railroad tracks were behind an office building. Well, I thought there was a row of buildings, and behind the building was a set of railroad tracks. So this is the image I had in my mind, and it was burned into my mind just seeing this situation happening. We didn't know from grassy knolls, we didn't know from book depositories, from Elm Street or anything like that, because nothing had been shown yet. They were just talking about it. But that story about the shots and the assassin being chased across railroad tracks changed immediately. And the next set of reports that came out talked about the book depository building and saying that all the shots came from there. And nobody ever mentioned the original reports again for about 30 or 40 years. Then I finally heard it on a rebroadcast, but I remember it happening. I now have a copy of it, and it's very, very plain to see the story changed. The original told the truth. The fatal shot came from the front.
All right, let's take a look at your career path. You heard that news. You were taking a day off from high school on your 18th birthday. Let's follow your career path to the point where you end up working in New York City and your company gets a copy of the Zapruder film to work with.
Okay. Well, first of all, I wasn't living in Hope long yet. I was living in Rego Park in Queens, in New York, one of the 5 boroughs there. I was working in Manhattan, in New York City, but I wasn't at the time. I was still in high school. Some years later, after a period of time, including being in the Army, I was given a job in New York City at a place which became known as Effects Unlimited. I was working there for several months, and I had an extreme interest in the Kennedy case, always had. And I was discussing it with my boss, Mo Weitzman, and he reached into a drawer and pulled out the film. And I was absolutely shocked. Anyone who has ever seen the Zapruder film is absolutely shocked at the exact moment of the fatal headshot, which is Zapruder frame number 313. And when the president is hit in the head, he's thrown violently backwards and to the left. It's instantaneous from the headshot. That's what you notice most about the film. When I showed it on Good Night America, the entire audience went, ah! They just absolutely shocked. No one had ever seen anything quite like it. It was a filmed murder. It was the exact opposite of what the official story was. Everyone expected the president to be thrown forward. He was not thrown forward. He was thrown violently backward. And then after he's thrown backward from frame 313 to 321, at 321 he bounces off the seat and starts to head forward then. But the fatal shot that killed him came from the front. Now, since then, I discovered there was a second headshot at frame 327, and this one came from behind. But since the brain was already gone from the skull, since it was blasted away, there's less of an obvious snap forward. But the forward motion of the president does increase at that point. That's the most interesting of all the later discoveries in the film. The president's head moves forward at a normal rate of speed as he bounces off the seat. But then at 327, the forward motion increases and blood starts to pour out of the front of his head by the right ear, the fractured area to the right temporal area, which was from the original headshot, the first of the two.
Is it a good time to go into the controversy over the film having been manufactured to go through the camera at 24 frames per second? Is that correct?
And the film actually went through the camera at 18 frames per second, the normal silent speed, and it was a silent camera. It does have the capability of going through at a faster speed, which would have been shown back as slow motion. If the film runs through the camera quickly, when you play it back at their normal speed, it appears to be going slower. Now, this does not appear to my eye to be what's happening at all, because everybody else is traveling at a normal speed. People in the background, people in the car, it never increases. So I don't believe that ever happened.
So how much time between 3:13, the fatal headshot, and the one you've just told us about at 3:27?
It's 0.7 seconds, approximately 3/4 of a second.
Okay.
Now, anyone who was there would have heard the second shot as sounding like an echo to the first shot, which is why a lot of people weren't aware of it, depending on where they were standing. People who were standing in one place, one part of the plaza, would hear it as two separate shots. And everybody who describes this shooting said that the last two sound like pop, pop, like that. Pop, pop. And right on top of each other. This goes against the official version. The entire shooting sequence takes about 8 seconds, 8.5 seconds, something in that area. And because those first two shots of all the shots that were fired that came too close together to be from the rifle that was supposed to be used by the Harvey Oswald, it indicates that at least one other rifle was used. So what they did is they looked at the positions of the geographical areas in Dealey Plaza, and they found very quickly that the first two shots were fired when the view from the so-called Oswald window to the car were blocked by a tree that was growing just off of Elm Street. Because of that, when it came time to figure out the shooting time, they had to cut it from 8 seconds to 5.6 seconds. 5.6 seconds because between the time that the president visibly comes clear of the tree until the fatal headshot is exactly 5.6 seconds.
Okay, I was just going to say the Warren Commission put out 5.6 seconds. You've just identified 8 and a fraction of seconds, so quite a disparity there. Well, let's go back
Indeed.
Indeed. Let's go back to where your company and your boss showed you the Zapruder film. What was the company and what were you tasked with when you received that film?
When I got it, I put it away. I mean, what could I do? Here's the thing. The president was killed as a result of a conspiracy. I had the proof that it was a conspiracy. And that made me feel, and I think perhaps rightly so, that my life was in danger. That perhaps if anyone found out that I had the film, that it would be a very, very fatal situation for me. So I kept my mouth shut. I didn't talk about it for years, except with a handful of leading researchers in the case. And one or two of them asked me to show the film at a symposium 10 years after the assassination in November of 1973. And I showed it there, but nobody knew it was going to happen. It was a secret. Nobody knew. And the people that were there were absolutely shocked when they saw it, because researchers in the case had been trying to get it for a decade, and they couldn't. And that was through fate, I guess, or the good Lord or whatever. I was the one who was given the opportunity to present it to the public. The problem is there was no coverage of it. The press weren't interested, and I showed it around midnight. So the word got out eventually within the research community and the people at this symposium which was called, it was the 10th year anniversary of what happened. It was at Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. I showed it a second time 2 days later, and people who had not seen it, who hadn't been there at midnight the first time, or got to see it there too. But again, it was not covered by the press and did not really receive any national coverage of it. But then in January, actually it was the beginning of February of 1975, I was asked to show it again at a symposium in Boston called The Politics of Conspiracy at one of the universities there.
Let me interject just here. I apologize, Robert, but at what point does this become affiliated with the Assassination Information Bureau? They credit you with being the person who made the slides available of the Zapruder film in even, I'll call it a symposium, as it was a project week at the Putney School in Putney, Vermont, and some of the members of the Assassination Information Bureau were there, and that's where I got a copy of the Zapruder film. So two things. One, where do they come in? And you're using continually here the pronoun they. I'm wondering who they are. Who's asking you to show this publicly? Where does the AIB come in, and what's your affiliation with them? And one other thing, when the film that you had and were presented with by your boss in New York City, is that one of the 3 copies that came out of Dallas, or was that a copy that was made later?
That was a copy the one that we had that they brought to us was the actual camera original. The original film that was in the camera that Zapruder was using. There's only one original. The other 3 copies are relatively clear, but they're degraded. When you're blowing up 8mm film, you lose quality with later generations. The copy that I showed on Goodnight America was a second-generation copy. My first-generation copy was used to make the second-generation copy. That brings us up to an interesting point, too, that I really need to mention. The copy I showed on Goodnight America was much clearer than it was broadcast. The Zapruder camera goes at 18 frames per second, 18.3 frames per second. All the professional film projection telecine material is at 24 frames per second. So running it directly 1-to-1, I would go by too fast, going faster than actual live action. So what they did is I offered to make them another copy, stretch framing it, which slows it down. You take each frame, photograph twice to slow it down to half speed. They didn't want to wait and take the time to do it, so they used something called a slow-mo disc, which is a early digital system for doing replays of football plays on TV. And unfortunately, you doing that degrades the image by some percentage, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20%. So what was actually shown was not as clear as my original, but it was clear enough to make a difference because no one had ever seen it, period, ever. This was history. Going back to your question about the AIB, the Assassination Information Bureau, these were kids who were going around, they were college kids, going around the country at various universities and civic groups and like that, and showing slides from the Zapruder film, from Life magazine, and other photographic evidence as well, explaining to people that there was, in fact, a conspiracy. And the AIB and an individual named Robert Saltzman were the ones who were going around the country getting interest in the case and letting people know, what we knew at the time. They're the ones that put on the symposium in Boston. And they had heard about me from one or two of the researchers that I trusted with the fact that I had the film. And they all pleaded with me to show the film at the conference, and I did. and it was picked up by CBS, ABC, NBC, all the major networks at the time. And they showed it and it became a national news story. And then I showed it the next day. Some of the stations actually photographed it off the screen as I showed it, and it became a national news story. And this is what the case turned out to be. It actually turned out to be a result of the showing of that film. In the audience was Dick Gregory, social activist, comedian, great man, terrific man. And he came up to me afterward and introduced himself. I said, well, you don't have to tell me who you are. Yeah. And he said, you need to do more with this than just show us here. I said, well, what should we do? What can we do? And he said, well, let's talk about it. And we went up to, with some friends up to the room and in the hotel. And he said, what we're going to do is this. He said, we're going to take it to Chicago, the two people that he trusted at the news media. And then we're going to go to the Rockefeller Commission and present the film as evidence of conspiracy and probable involvement of the Central Intelligence Agency. Just the Rockefeller Commission was investigating CIA activities and assassinations around the world. And that's what we did. And while I was testifying, the first of many times I testified before government commissions and committees, we got a phone call. And the phone call is from Jeraldo Revera's office. They had heard from Dick Gregory from the press conference in Chicago that he was involved in this. And they Jeraldo Revera contacted Lil Gregory, Dick Gregory's wife, and found out where we were. So in the middle of my testifying about the film and what I knew about the case, I was asked if I would show the film on this show. And I told him, yes, I would. And we made an appointment to get together in New York City, and the rest is history. Dick Gregory, being so well known and being truly a political activist, he was known. He was well known. He had written several books. He had an outstanding guy anyway. And the situation just brought itself one step after the other. It's something that could not have been planned. It just happened. And I couldn't have made it happen. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. It was like Ferris Bueller and at first, and then like Forrest Gump. So it was a strange situation. I've never been sorry that I did it. Eventually, I had to quit my job because I was getting calls every week to present the film publicly at different colleges around the country. And I've shown the film probably in 3/4 of the 50 states. The thing is this, the Zapruder film is the actual events that happened. Visually, you're getting to see it. It's a photographic record of what happened. But additionally, it's also a clock. It's a clock for what happened in the plaza. You can figure the timing out from counting the frames at the 18.3 frames per second. Now, by the way, that is the average running speed. And sometimes it runs a little bit faster, sometimes a little bit slower. But the average running speed is clocked at 18.3 frames per second. And because of that, we know that between the time the president is first hit and between the time the first and the second hit, it's approximately 2 seconds between those two. And then Governor Connolly is hit after that. Now, according to the Warren Commission's story, the single bullet theory, I have another name for it. I call it the single bullshit theory.
Okay.
Because that's what it is. It's an absolute lie.
Robert, there's no better expert on the planet. Can you take us through the sequence of shots? I've been with you when you've said that first shot that hit him where and at what frame, or approximately what frame? Frame 162, frame 313 you've alluded to here, and 327. Can you take us through the sequence from the beginning, the first shot that hit the president, to the last one?
Well, a lot of it is arbitrary because different people see different things within it. If we go by what Governor Connolly himself said when he examined individual frames of the film at the offices of Life magazine, he picked a point where he was hit, which was considerably after when the Warren Commission said the president was hit. Now, again, this is very important. The Zapruder film, I said, is a clock. Well, the clock gets related to the capability of that particular rifle, which is supposed to be the only rifle used during this event, even though the rifle was originally a 7.65 Italian Mauser. The one that's in evidence now is a 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano. I'm sorry, the Mauser was German, and the Mannlicher Carcano, the one that's in evidence now, is Italian. Taking the firing capability of the rifle as found from the FBI testing, to get off 2 shots is 2.3 seconds. Not even trying to hit anything, but the fastest can be done is 2.3 seconds. The Zapruder film shows the first 2 shots at 1.6 seconds, which is much faster than the capability of the rifle. So instead of going to the obvious conclusion that there was another rifle used between those 2 shots, the Warren Commission came up with a single bullet theory that one bullet went through President Kennedy and went on to hit Governor Connolly. Now, if you follow that single bullet theory, you got the president hit in the back, 7 inches below the shoulder line.
Robert,
Ford,
and when approximately does that happen? We're looking at the Zapruder film right here on a screen with a computer, and we're at frame 197, and Kennedy has yet to be obstructed by the upcoming freeway sign, and he's waving to the crowd, seemingly not hit yet. Is that accurate?
Pretty much so, but let me explain that I work in Dealey Plaza. I go down there every weekend, every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I meet people like you and many, many others. And a woman came up to me one day. Her name is Jean Newman, and Jean Newman, not related at all to Bill and Gail Newman, who were standing right by the president when the fatal shot struck. She told me that she was standing in the plaza and told me that she saw a bullet strike the pavement. Now, this is new. No one knew this. She had mentioned it to the Warren Commission and all, and they ignored her completely. Well, when she told me this and told me where she saw the bullet hit the street, I went back to the Zapruder film. And I actually found the frame in the film where the bullet hit the street. Now, I have a...
Did you identify that frame, Robert? All the
Yes.
Zapruder frames are numbered, so we have that. We can look at the Zapruder film with the numbered frames. So you found that shot that hit the curb, a missed shot. What frame would that be?
Well, let me since we're going to be just dealing with different frame numbers, let me go to my book. As you know, though, I've written 8 books on the assassination, and the latest book is called JFK Absolute Proof. And let me find the exact frame number so I don't lead you astray here.
I apologize. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot here, but I know that you know this and people respect your knowledge of the film, and it just would be nice to get kind of a sequence. People say to me, well, okay, Holiday, when was the first shot? When was the second shot? And I can tell them unequivocally.
The first shot is at Zapruder frame 144. 144.
So President Kennedy is waving to the crowd well after that.
Right. Now, here's my point. At frame 144, up until that point, the president has been looking inboard Julie Clouds, looking to his left and waving. At that exact point, he hears the shot fired and stops waving and turns his head to look immediately toward the grassy knoll to the right front of the car.
We're watching it when we see that. Yes, we can see that.
It didn't hit him. It hit the street just in front of the car and slightly toward the left side of it. The man who you see standing there is Philip Willis. He's taking individual photographs, still photographs.
Could you help us point him out exactly? We can see his young daughter with the white sweater and the plaid skirt running along. Up from there, which one is Phil Willis?
Well, the thing is, the daughter is Rosemary Willis.
Yes.
And the two of them, she was the younger of the two daughters.
Linda is the other one, and I've interviewed Linda, and I put her in my book.
Okay, the man who seems to be stepping up or backing up onto the sidewalk, standing there, holding a camera up in front of his face there.
Oh, yes, I found him.
That's Philip Willis.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that.
By the way, his daughter Rosemary is about,
she's 12 years old, I think, at the time. Linda was 14.
Yeah. It's about, I don't know, maybe 10 feet behind him, slightly toward his left.
Yes.
Right as we do.
Yes.
Yeah. Now that first shot missed and it hit the street. And you can see the result of that because there's a small little puff of asphalt coming up where the bullet hit. Now I asked Jean Newman where they came from, the front or the rear, as she observed it. And she said it had to come from the front because the puff of concrete that came up into the air went toward Houston Street, toward the rear. So the shot had to come from the front.
Boy, that shot missed badly, didn't it?
Yeah, it missed much worse than you would think, but it's not the one that missed by the farthest. There's more than that. We'll get back into that as we move on down the street here. The president starts to wave again because he was not hit by the bullet and probably thought it was a backfire or firecracker or something like that. And we can only guess what he thought because a moment later he's hit with a non-fatal shot. The second shot that came in from the front also, struck him in the throat above the knot in the tie. They said it was, the Warren Commission said it was in the knot in the tie, but no, it was higher than that. It was above the knot in the tie, according to the doctors. A moment later, the president is then struck in the back, about 7 inches below the shoulder line. And this is important. You got to remember this and picture it in your mind. The official story is the shot came downward from the 6th floor of the depository, entering the back at a downward angle. Yet, according to the Warren Commission, the entrance wound in the throat was an exit wound, about 8 inches higher than the entrance wound. How does that happen? The bullet didn't hit any bones. It wasn't deflected. Yet they said that it came from behind when, in fact, it was an entrance wound as described by all the doctors that saw it.
I'm going to assume that you're very familiar with Paul O'Connor having put his pinky into what he says is that wound until it hit rib meat. Those are his words, not mine. And he couldn't find a bullet, so it didn't go in very far, that bullet in the back. Can you comment on that?
Here's the thing. The autopsy photographs have been held back from public view. They will not be shown publicly until at least the year 2039. That's 75 years after the release of the Warren Report, which was released in 1964. Why is this important? It's important because the autopsy photographs show the president's back. The ones that show him in the back show that there are two holes back there. One is one of entrance, one is one of exit. The upper of the two is one of exit from the throat wound that entered the throat from the front and came out of his back. Now, this left a hole in the back higher than another hole, which is a smaller entrance wound which has a abrasion collar around it, which happens only on entrance, not on exit. And this one went in, but apparently did not traverse the body. It got stuck in the intercostal muscles between the ribs. And that's what Paul O'Connor felt. Okay?
Yes, thank you. That makes sense.
All right.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Right after that, after the throat entrance wound, a shot hit him in the back and threw him downward and forward. Then somewhere along the line, Governor Connolly is hit 3 times. He's hit by the right armpit, he's hit in the right wrist, and the left thigh. All 3 of these could have been from just 2 bullets, but had to be from at least 2 bullets because of the angles and the timing. Governor Connolly himself says he did not know that he had been hit in the wrist and the thigh until he awoke in Parkland Hospital. That's when he found that out. So he wasn't hit at the same time. And you can see that, too, because after Governor Connolly was hit for the first time, right after clearing the roadside. By the way, the 2 shots that hit the president were before the first one. The one in the throat was before the roadside. The one that hit him in the back is after the roadside. And right after the president is hit, Governor Connolly is hit. But he is not hit in the right wrist yet because he is holding his Texas Stetson hat in his hand. And he's holding it for quite some time until he's hit again. This is further evidence he was hit more than once. Possible that the wrist wound or the back wound might have been involved in the thigh wound. But because of the angles being off and because of the timing, Governor Connolly was probably hit 3 separate times, 3 separate bullets, but it could have been only 2. It's possible that 2 of Governor Connolly's hits were from 1 bullet. We don't know. Apparently, there's no way to know.
What we do know is it's ludicrous what Arlen Specter, the inventor of the single bullet theory, came up with. That 1 bullet entered the...
I refer to him as single bullet Specter. He's the one who created the preposterous theory of the single bullet. But the one who sold it to the Warren Commission was Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford, who later got his reward by becoming president of the United States in Richard Nixon's last act of retribution against the American people. The thing is that he realized that there was a problem, what I mentioned before, that the so-called entrance wound in the back and the so-called exit wounds in the throat are in the wrong position vertically. The hole in the front and the throat is higher, much higher than the one in the back by at least 6, 7, 8 inches. What Ford did is he changed the writing of the words within the Warren report describing the wound. Originally, it said that the person was hit in the back. He changed it. Ford changed it. He actually hand wrote on the original copy of the report and said that the bullet was in the back of the neck. He added of the neck. He created what I call verbal plastic surgery. He physically moved the entrance wound. And before he died, he was asked about it, and he said that he did it for clarification. How does putting it in the wrong place add to clarification?
It's a good question. It's a good question. My question for you is, do you think Gerald Ford did that on his own, or he was directed?
There's no way to actually know. Somebody, Lyndon Johnson once said that Gerald Ford couldn't chew gum and piss at the same time.
Yeah.
Probably extremely accurate.
A lot of negative things said about Gerald Ford.
Well, one point to make as an aside to this, the CIA was getting little notes, little bits of information from Alan Dulles, one of the Warren Commission members, in violation of his non-disclosure agreement. The FBI was getting their information the same way from Gerald Ford in violation to his non-disclosure agreement. He was actually spinning information from the Warren Commission to the CIA and the FBI. So anyway, that's another aside. But let's move on now. We don't know exactly when Governor Connolly was hit for the second and third times. We do know that the first one was after the roadside. Now, the next shot that we see the result of is the fatal shot at 313. This hit the president in the right temporal area from the front, blew out the entire back of his skull, and threw him to the rear and to the left at a rate of speed of 100.3 feet per second is the rate of acceleration, which is incredibly fast, faster than any muscular situation could do. And then as he hits the back of his seat, as I mentioned before, at frame 321, and then starts to bounce forward until frame 327, which is the fatal shot that hit him in the non-fatal shot because he was already dead. It hit the president in the back of the head, just above the hairline, and threw him forward.
That's at 327. You were saying, I think.
Yeah. That's the real last shot. Now, one thing it's going to take a little moment or so to talk about it, but it's very important to me because I did it. You've heard, I know, about the acoustics evidence. The actual sound of the shots was recorded by a police motorcyclist. His name was H.B. McLean. And McLean actually had the transmit button on his motorcycle was stuck open and recorded the sounds of the shots. What we did was the House Committee, the House Assassinations Committee, had the acoustics tape analyzed, and it was found that there was more than 3 shots fired. The Warren Commission said there were only 3 shots. Well, after the president's headshots, another shot is fired that hit James Tague, a bystander by the triple underpass at the western end of the plaza. Why is this important? Because that extra shot could not be accounted for. It cannot be accounted for. You've got 3 shots fired according to the Warren Commission. The first one hit the president in the back, they said. The second one missed completely and hit James Tague by the underpass. And the third one hit the president in the head and killed him. That's the 3 they allowed for. What about Governor Connolly? Well, that's when they created the single bullet theory. And that's the problem that we've been fighting for all this time, because Arlen Specter's single bullet theory, which, I've mentioned before what I call it, it simply could not be. And they because James Tague was hit, they had to claim that he was hit by the third shot and created the single bullet theory on top of that. So anyway, there is all of that. But the acoustics evidence was very, very important because the human ear could not hear the sounds of the shots because McLean's motorcycle engine was right by the microphone, and it buried the sounds of everything that was going on. But what we were able to do is to, by computer, a fellow named James Barger from both Baranek and Newman in Boston did an acoustic study and fed it through a computer, and the computer found 11 shots, a total of 11 shots. The Warren Commission said 3. So they had the House Assassinations Committee had to deal with this somehow. They arbitrarily buried about 7 of the shots, pretending that they were just little things that happened that weren't really shots at all, but they were.
So let me make sure I'm getting this correctly. The Warren Commission knew, and they did their work between the assassination in November of 22 and till the following fall of 64 when they issued the report, some 9 months after the assassination. They already had acoustic evidence that identified 11 shots.
Well, the Warren Commission had the evidence because they had the sound recording. But they didn't know that the shots were recorded there. In the shots, they didn't know where the microphone was. And the House Assassinations Committee was able to discover where the shots were actually recorded.
Okay, and that's the timestamp I was looking. That's a timestamp I was looking for, Robert.
I was part of that. And the way I was part of that was this. I got a phone call one day from G. Robert Blakey, the director of the Warren Commission. The
House Select Committee.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. He called me up and he said, did I know of any photographic evidence of a motorcycle approximately 8 car lengths behind the president's car? And I went to my archive and my films, and in the Dallas Cinema Associates compilation of films, I found a film that showed a motorcycle exactly where he said it would be, 8 car lengths behind the president. And through a microscope, I actually read the number off the motorcycle's fender. And I gave them that number, and through that, they traced who was riding that motorcycle, and it was H.P. McLean. And McLean eventually said yes, and my motorcycle button did stick a lot. I said he wishes he had $1 for every time it happened. But anyway, that's how they found out, who it was who was recording it. And then we found him in the films of the assassination, exactly where he was supposed to be in order to record it. Now, what he had there was a sound recording of 11 shots. Professor Blakey, G. Robert Blakey, the head of the House Assassinations Committee, he did not want there to be more than 4 shots. He didn't want it to be more than 3 shots. But the acoustics evidence through echo patterns on that tape showed echo patterns that showed that at least one of the shots came from the right front for the fatal headshot. That's incredibly important. Important.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, why is it important? Because that's where we started getting into a real problem. We called it, those of us who worked for the Assassinations Committee called it Blakey's problem. What it came down to is this. Blakey did not want the Warren Commission report about Oswald firing the fatal shot to be thrown away. He didn't want to make them look any more stupid than they already were. But what it works out to is this. The fatal shot at frame 313, Blakey wanted to say that that shot came from behind, that it was a 4th shot. The 3rd shot is the one that really hit the president in the head of the ones that he allowed. And that was the one that came from the front. The theory behind all of this comes down to a very simple fact, that if it had been Lee Harvey Oswald or anybody up there in the 6th floor firing that 3rd shot, or for the 4th shot rather, the way Blakey had it, that means that whoever fired from behind did not kill the president, that the one from the front. This is getting very confusing, I know.
Actually, I'm still with you, I think. It is technical, but I'm still with you.
Well, what happened was we took a Zapruder copy, which was also mine, from the Secret Service, and we tried to match it up to the Zapruder film, the film and the acoustics tape together, eventually to try to make a sound copy of the Zapruder film. Now, how would we do this? We had the original sound recording of the shots, an analysis of those shots, where they came from, and directions that they came from the computer. They recreated the sounds from those shots on the actual acoustics tape and took firing shots in Dealey Plaza for testing, and recreated a tape with the shots from the rear and the front where they fall based on the 4 shots that Professor Blakey was allowing to be in the report. They wanted me to try to synchronize this, so I did it 2 different ways. I did it with a fatal headshot of being at 313 and doing it the way Professor Blakey wanted, which was a 4th shot from behind striking the president in the head. What this would mean is that if it had been Oswald up there shooting, he didn't kill the president because the shot came from a different point. 313 is where the fatal shot came from. He would not allow this. So here we go again. I presented the evidence to the actual congressmen themselves at a meeting. Professor Blakey would not allow me to present the findings that I and 2 of the other scientists that were working on this, Mark Weiss and Ernest Ashkenazi, they and I were working on this together. I synchronized the film to the tape, and this was another thing that related also back to the projectors that were used at Goodnight America. The professional films, all the film equipment that they had in the Library of Congress where we were doing this work were all at 24 frames per second, all for sound films. They had nothing that ran at silent speed. So I came up with the idea of getting a portable sound projector with a magnetic recording capability. And what we did is we ran the film at the silent speed, but with the sound recording it. And I managed to get at the actual speed the shots that were fired, and we synchronized 313 and 327 at the fatal headshot. If you do it my way, with a fatal shot striking from the front, there is an event that happens on film to every one of the shots. If you do it Blakey's way, with the 4th shot hitting the president, nothing else lines up.
Very interesting.
Very simply, what this means is the fatal shot that killed the president came from the front, from the grassy knoll.
Let me ask you, Robert, do you someplace in your cache of things have a copy of the Zapruder film with sound as you figured it out?
Yeah, I do.
When are we going to get to see and hear that one?
Well, the thing is, when it was shown, the copy that we made was shown by the House Assassinations Committee at the open hearings, but it wasn't very, very clear the way they did it, and it was difficult to see. Somewhere around here, I have a sound copy of the film, but I have an archive of films that's over 300 reels of film. Zapruder, Nix, Muchmore, Bell Hughes, Towner Dorman, Pascal Bronson, all of them, all the films from all over Dealey Plaza. And I would have to find the sound copy. Right now, they're all in storage.
Okay. Now, I would say we've sufficiently covered maybe the technical aspects of the Zapruder film. If you disagree, let me know. If not, you've agreed to do this podcast because of some things that have surfaced recently about the Zapruder film that you find ridiculous.
Yeah, worse than ridiculous, actually evil. What it comes down to is this. There are people who pretend to be researchers in the Kennedy case who have decided that they want to destroy the most important piece of evidence that we've got. And they claim that the Zapruder film has been faked, that sections of the film were cut out. They were not. If somebody were to cut out a section of film, say 8 frames, 10 frames, whatever, in one spot, everyone in the car and in the background would jump from point A to point B from before and after the splice. Does that make sense to you? Do you understand that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. This has to happen. If you look at the two splices that are in the Zapruder film earlier, before there are any shots, you see everyone in the car jump from point A to point B, when people in the background as well. So if somebody were to cut out a specific individual frame or group of frames, somebody said that there was I think it was 8 seconds worth of film. 8mm film has 80 frames per foot. So you would have nearly half the entire film cut out for this to happen. Now, why do they say that the film was cut, according to them? Number one, they said, well, you can't see the car stop. Well, the car didn't stop. The Zapruder film, the Nix film, the Muchmore film, the Bronson film all show the car never stops. It slowed down to 5.2 seconds. So some people in that moment might have thought that it was stopping or that it stopped, but it didn't. And when you carefully go over the testimony of people who said it stopped, it didn't. They didn't say it. They said that it was slowing down, that it was stopping, but not that it actually stopped. And if people who were in the motorcade said it stopped, it's because their cars stopped behind the president's, but the president's car did not stop ever. So that kills that idea. What they're saying is that because it doesn't show the car stopping, the film's got to be faked. They're wrong. Another reason why they say that is because as the Zapruder is filming, he's filming the lead motorcyclist coming from Houston Street onto Elm. And as he does that, the film stops and then starts again with the car already on Elm Street. They say, well, that means that they cut the turnout of the car onto Elm Street. Really? Well, the answer to that one's really simple. Abraham Zapruder didn't know where in the motorcade the president's car was, and he started filming the lead motorcycles. And he's filming, and he's filming, and he's filming. All of a sudden, as we watch the film, the car is already on Elm Street. So what they're saying is because you can't see the turn, it shows that the film is spliced. Well, it wasn't spliced. What had actually happened was Zapruder's camera was a manually wound camera. It used a spring load. You had to use a crank to wind that spring up. Zapruder started filming the lead motorcycles, and the camera was running down. And he had to stop filming to wind the camera again. And while he did that, the car made the turn onto Elm Street. And then he saw that the president's car was there, and he started filming again and got it all the way through the assassination scenes and to the underpass. If he hadn't wound the film, it would have run out of wind before the fatal headshots. We would have missed the whole thing.
Boy, that's all new to me, Robert. I did not know that. My explanation always been that he was a little bit cheap and he started to film, then realized, hey, the president isn't here, so I'll save my film, and then he picked it up again a little bit late. But that's very interesting. I did not know that.
Well, if you watch the film as it exists now, as you look at it, home movie stuff they did to his family and friends, all that stuff has been cut out. We don't see that. That was private stuff for theirs. But when the assassination sequence in the plaza happens, just count the amount of seconds that the motorcade is just showing the lead motorcycles, and deduct that from the 30-odd seconds that you can get out of the wind, and you'll see that the film could not keep recording. The camera wouldn't be able to do it. That's the second reason why they think the film is faked. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is insane. Nobody with any common sense would believe it. And I've explained this to countless symposiums and meetings. And the thing is, people are just so in desperate to find as many conspiracies as they can, they fall for this garbage. It's ridiculous. And there's about a dozen people that say this, and they just spread the word, and people are picking it up, and they're challenging the most important piece of evidence we've got. This is really, really a critical situation, because these people present themselves as researchers, and they're not. If anything, they're put into our community to present false evidence, and it's killing the real thing.
By our community, you're referring to the research community. For many, many years, since the beginning, since the assassination, there have been these absurd, these ludicrous theories. For example, Bill Greer, the driver of the car, turning around and shooting President Kennedy in the throat. And those things get tangled up with real research and leads people to refer to a large number of people as conspiracy nuts.
There you go. There you go. And this is one thing I find extremely concerning. We had a lunatic the other day. There's a symposium here in Dallas, and I won't even mention this idiot's name, but he says the film is definitely faked, and he gave the other problems I mentioned before, but he came up with a new one. So the film now shows only one Secret Service agent jumping on the back of the car. There was only one. He said, no, there were two. There was only one. The Zapruder film shows that. The Nix film shows that. The Bronson film shows that. The Muchmore film shows that. All the other films would have, if the Zapruder film were faked, all the others would have to be faked exactly the same way, showing exactly the same thing. And the question is, if another Secret Service agent jumps on the back of the car, where did he come from? Where did he go? You've got still pictures. You've got the Alkins photographs. You've got tons of stuff that show that this didn't happen. But this guy is selling this garbage to people that want to learn about the case, and they're buying it.
Yeah, it's been one of the tragedies over the years that this kind of nonsense has worked its way out to the American public, and it's used by some people to refute real research. You know, you've mentioned other films too, Robert, like you just mentioned the Nix film, the Bronson film, and others. Do any of those other films show the fatal shot, but from a different angle?
They all do. There are a lot more than those four frames, more than those four films, rather. I mentioned the Oliver film, and the reason we don't have that is because the FBI confiscated it 2 days after the assassination, and have kept it. They never released it. We haven't been able to see it. The other ones I was able to get through the years, through one way or another. Zapruder, Nix, much more. They're all very important. All of these things show their part of from different angles of what actually did happen. The Zapruder film is really, really important. It's key to trying to find the truth about what really happened. And the people that are saying that it's been faked are just killing the most important single piece of evidence that we've got. The second most important evidence is the testimony of the Dallas doctors. And I just thought of something. You asked a question before, and the answer I gave was incomplete. It dawned on me now that that's the case. I've produced two separate DVD programs. One is called The Killing of a President. One is called JFK: The Case for Conspiracy. The other one is called The Assassination Films. The Assassination Films shows all of the films that were taken that day. There's like 122 of them, between the motorcade, the event of the assassination, the immediate aftermath, all of those. And they're all on there, and you can see for yourself what's there.
Let's also say, Robert, that you have put those together so that people can actually watch through films that you've pieced together, the motorcade from Love Field all the way through to the Triple Overpass. In the Case for Conspiracy, I think. Is that right?
That's correct. Well, I was thinking before you asked about a sound copy of the Zapruder film, and the answer is that on the other one, in The Killing of a President, there is the sound film of the assassination is there. I had forgotten that for a moment. But yeah, there is a sound recreation is there. Now, once again, I didn't get a chance to finish the whole thing about that before. The actual sound recording, the tape, shows 11 shots. Damage in the plaza shows at least 7, maybe more that we can't prove. Professor Blakey allowed only the 4 shots of all the shots that are there. The first, second, and fourth shots coming from behind, assuming that they all came from the so-called sniper's nest. They could have come from anywhere from behind, but they did come from behind based on the echo patterns. The third one came from the area of the stockade fence, exactly 8 feet to the west of the near corner of the fence, where the north, south, and east-west parts of the fence come together. This is really, really, really important because that particular shot, they went through a great deal of testing, firing test shots in the plaza and comparing the echo patterns with test shots that are fired in the plaza and the actual acoustics tape. Now, there were more shots fired than he would allow. But if you go back and check the actual work that we did, there actually were 11 shots on the tape. There may have been more that we don't know about, but they recorded 11. Anyway, that's a key spot because even fully loaded, the so-called Oswald weapon could only fire 6 shots. Where did the extra shots come from? How do they account for echo patterns from different places? It doesn't make any sense. Once again, the Zapruder film becomes the most important piece of evidence because of the synchronization of the acoustics tape. Now, I through fate, I guess, or whatever, providence, who knows, I got to be a part of all of this. I got to be the one who did the acoustics tape, the one who releases the Zapruder film in the first place, and the next much more and Bronson films as well, along with all the other ones as well. The thing is this, I didn't start this thing to do what it's turned into. It just so happened that's the way it was. And I'm very proud I got to be the one to do it. It's very important. President Kennedy was a great president, probably the greatest. And he gave his life for trying to make the world a better and safer place. And he was killed for it. And I feel that we as a people owe it to his memory to try to find the truth about what happened. And, you know, it's been a long time now. It's been 60 years. And the majority of the people that would have been involved in this must be dead by now. So it's too late for justice in this case, but it's never too late for the truth.
You know, you had said that, I think on the chapter that I put in my book about you, the very last statement is that statement that you made. You used to tell the students that. It's never too late for the truth. Do you think the American public will ever see the actual autopsy photos? Or if they can see them today, where would they go as opposed to those that were put out by the Warren Report?
Okay, the Warren Report never released anything as far as the autopsy materials go. They're withheld until the year 2039. Now, the way things have been going, we can be pretty sure that they won't even be released then. But I released everything that exists, at least what the government admits exists. There are photographs that were shown to the investigators of the House Assassinations Committee, but not released to the public. There are about 15 photographs left. The original inventory showed 152. We know that approximately 90% of the autopsy photographs have disappeared. They're no longer in the collection of the National Archives. Why is this important? Because there are questions as to the authenticity of the actual films, specifically the one showing the rear of the head. I just mentioned a second ago about the Dallas doctors. Well, why is it important? Because the autopsy photographs do not show what any of the doctors saw. In my latest book, JFK Absolute Proof, I published the statements of nearly 90 witnesses that saw the president's head wounds. Most of them are doctors. But every single one of them, without exception, says that the fatal shot, as they saw on the president's body, came from the right front and blew out the back of his head. This is really important. And again, this is important because the Zapruder film shows that area, the back of the president's head, being blasted out at frame 313. You know, we mentioned before the direction he was thrown in, but you can actually see in frames after frame 313 the damage to the back of his head, specifically frames 335 and 337, which are the only two really clear frames of the Zapruder film after the headshot. Now, what's really important is when the Warren Commission published frames from the Zapruder film in volume 18 of their 26 volumes, they stop at frame 334, one frame, 1/18th of a second before the clear frame, so you can't tell.
My nephew here, Reggie, has a question for you. He's wondering, how did I, at a project week at a private high school in Vermont, end up with my copy, 8mm copy of the Zapruder film? I think you've answered that, and that is the AIB and or that group of people started to disseminate copies. They were making their own.
Yeah, what I had done is there were two situations. During the Clay Shaw investigation in New Orleans, 1970, 87, and 88, Life magazine was given a subpoena from Jim Garrison to supply them with a copy of the Zapruder film for the trial. And the copy that they made was degraded on purpose so that it couldn't, clear copies could not be made.
Again, who would they be, Robert, that they made? Who would have produced that bit of degraded film?
Lane.
Mark Lane, okay. Mark
Lane did the one of the earliest researchers in the case.
Yes, familiar with Mark Lane, but he wouldn't have. Right.
Why would he have degraded? That they made for the Shaw trial, they degraded. They sent a copy, not the original film, but a copy of the film, to Humark, a lab in New York City, and had a copy made. And then they inserted the missing frames, the frames that were cut out of the film, from their one and only intact copy. They actually cut it apart to do this. And they inserted those frames into the Humark copy and then duplicated it again, so it got even more degraded. And that's what was used to make the copies for the time of the Shaw trial. And if you look at the two between that one and mine, the other one is just visual mud. But you can see what's happening. You can see the rear motion of the president's head very clearly. Anyway, there's so many little aspects to this. And once again, the Zapruder film becomes key and central to the whole issue. When you compare what the doctors said to the Zapruder film and what they describe, and you check that to the visual images, you'll see that they were all absolutely correct.
That would be my conclusion also.
I will also suggest one thing that does not relate to me specifically. There is a documentary that was just released called What the Doctors Saw. And what the doctors saw, they found 7 of the doctors, most of them I already interviewed. They show them sitting around in a round circle talking about what they saw. And every single one of them agrees with what I've just said to you.
Yeah, that film is
And
very popular right now, and many people have asked me about it. Have I seen it? Yeah.
it's very accurate. My wife and I, Janet and I, are talking about releasing sometime in the future. I had interviewed these doctors on videotape, more than 20 of them, and they go into a great deal of detail on what they saw, and they're unanimous that the shot came from the front. They don't talk about grassy knolls, most of them. They just say from the right front. Well, Oswald, had it been him or anybody on the 6th floor, was behind the president, and the wounds would show a totally different set of circumstances.
Well, I think you've made a pretty good case here, Robert. It's a good thing we're not in a court of law, or everybody would have to agree with you. Or we should be in a court of law, and everybody would agree with you.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to say that. It's too bad we're not.
We should be. Yeah.
But the thing is, Oswald was murdered by Jack Ruby before he had a chance to be put on trial. Based on the physical evidence, he could never have been convicted. I think that's why they killed him.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I don't know why everybody doesn't see it that way.
You've been listening to Beyond the Classroom. We'll see you next time.